And welcome everyone to this edition of Crimson Live here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. I'm Roger Hoover, and it's great to have you along for what we've kind of rebranded Crimson Live. It had been Quarantine Q&A, but now that we're starting to look forward towards the football season, we've rebranded to Crimson Live, and that's proudly presented by Alabama One Credit Union. They've been voted Tuscaloosa's best credit union and best mortgage lender. Alabama One offers low-rate auto, mortgage, and business loans, plus protection for it all with Alabama One Insurance. You can visit any of their 9 local branches or check them out online at alabama1.org. Alabama One, a proud supporter of Crimson Tide Athletics. This is the time of the year everyone starts getting really excited for college football season, and kind of part of the college football fandom is thumbing through those preseason football magazines that you see all over the place, and the best one really, in my opinion, year in and year out, has been the Phil Steele College Football Preview, and Phil Steele joins us now via telephone from his office. And Phil, it's just great to talk to you. We understand the magazine's starting to hit some mailboxes. We'll be at Barnes & Noble soon. Great to have you on with us today. How are you doing, Phil?
I am doing great, Roger. How about yourself this afternoon?
Well, we're getting excited. This is a great time of the year, as I mentioned, and just hopeful that, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are able to have some college football this year. But for you, everyone's experience has been changed a little bit by COVID-19 in the last few months. How has it been for you trying to put out a magazine? I understand it's been a different process than normal.
Yeah, it definitely was different. Normally, we send the magazine to the press the end of May to get on the newsstands before July 4th. But this year, the whole office shut down. I mean, Ohio got shut down in the months of March and the majority of April. So I was just in here at the office toiling away by myself, waiting for the staff to be able to return. Finally, towards the end of April, they were able to come back. They came back fully charged, and we started reaching out to the coaches, talked to about 110 of the 130 head coaches out there, going over their teams with them. We got everybody in the right order on all the teams. And the one thing that's changed, we normally print a couple hundred thousand magazines. This year we only printed 50,000, as opposed to being everywhere, all the grocery stores, every bookstore. We're only in 2 bookstores this year exclusively, Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So if you have a Barnes & Noble or Books A Million close by, go there. If you're anywhere else, don't even bother looking for the magazine. It's not anywhere but Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, or you can get it at philsteele.com.
And as you started to make your predictions for this upcoming season, how much did the pandemic really factor into your top 25 or how you expect some conferences to shake out?
Well, it didn't, all my conference forecasts are based on conference play. So as far as the forecasts in the magazine go, even if the majority of the conference go to conference-only play, I'm good with it because we don't base it on overall record. We base it on conference record. The second factor was, though, trying to determine that home field edge. You don't know how many fans are going to be in the stands for these games. And, maybe some of those stadiums that are really difficult to play in would be a lot different if you played in an empty stadium, or maybe a stadium that had 20% capacity or 25%. We'll see how that plays out. But that was probably the most difficult thing, was trying to determine what kind of home field edge to give each team.
And for you, of course, known for your predictions, what are your predictions for where we could be over the next few weeks as we try to start this college football season? What's most important for you to see?
Well, we need to see the numbers go down, and I think we need to see the kids return to campus, practice proper social distancing, and keep everybody healthy. And I'm bullish. I think we're going to get this thing turned around and play some football this year. So I'm extremely bullish that they'll be playing football in the fall. In the fall.
In the fall, not the spring.
That's right. In the fall. It would be really interesting. I'm a FCS fan as well. If we could play the FBS in the fall, like I think we will, and the FCS are all moving to the spring, won't that really be exciting for FCS football? Everybody's going to be watching FCS football in the spring then.
Yeah, it would certainly get them the ratings and maybe a bigger television footprint. It would be exciting as well. Well, looking ahead at what's coming up in the magazine this year, you've already announced your top 25, and looking at the Alabama Crimson Tide, you have Alabama preseason number 3 and also picked to win the SEC and play in the college football playoff. Just what are your overall thoughts on the Crimson Tide, and then we'll go from there.
Well, they're coming off a disastrous season, right, Roger? I mean, 8th in the country. That Alabama, really?
This is an Alabama.
Yeah, this is an Alabama team that has a lot of talent. And naturally, the biggest question mark probably on the entire team goes the quarterback situation. They don't have Tua back. Mac Jones, Bryce Young, I think are going to battle it out, but they're surrounded by talent. You look at the running backs, Najee Harris, Trey Sanders, Brian Robinson. I rate them the number one running backs, or number two running backs in the entire country. The receiving core, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. Yeah, they lose some players like Judy and Ruggs, but they've got plenty of talent returning a receiver. And I'm a member of the Joe Moore Award Committee. And I put Alabama as my number one ranked offensive line. They had three guys turn down the NFL after return. And I bounced it off the rest of the Joe Moore Award Committee, and nobody really batted an eye. Alabama arguably has the best offensive line in the country, so that's a great place to start. Defensively, remember last year, a couple of linebackers, Dylan Moses, who I had on my All-American team last year, was injured, out for the year in August. Same thing with Joshua McMillan, and they had to play a couple of true freshmen at the linebacker spot in Harrison Lee. Those guys are now softs. Moses is back. McMillan's back. I like that linebacking core. And you look up front defensively, Barmore, Dale, Young were all freshmen last year. They're now sophomores. Patrick Surtain leads a secondary that just reloads every year. I think Alabama's defense is better than last year, especially getting those linebackers back. The biggest question mark is quarterback, but when you look at the schedule and you look at the talent, yeah, here's a shocker. Alabama's going to be favored in every game.
And you've talked about it before as well. Any year that Alabama feels like it has something to prove, or it's been maybe 2 or 3 years since that last national title, always a dangerous team. And like you mentioned as well, they have the weapons to really back it up on the field.
Yeah, it's usually a team that comes back and plays with a vengeance, and I can't imagine what it's like finishing number 8 in the country after all these finishes, the previous 4 years, number 1, number 2, number 1, number 2, and all the way down to number 8. Now, a lot of schools would die for that type of placement, but at Alabama, the expectations are higher, so you got to think there's a good hunger there.
So Alabama preseason number 3 in your preseason magazine, behind number 1, Ohio State, number 2, Clemson. What were the separators for the Buckeyes and the Clemson Tigers just ahead of the Crimson Tide in your mind?
I think talent-wise, both those teams are right there with Alabama. I could argue Alabama's better at some positions, clearly, but to me it boiled down to quarterback. And when you look at quarterback, Clemson's got a guy in Trevor Lawrence who was dominant in the previous year, in 2018, as a freshman. And he came back as a soft, and he might have tried to do too much. You look at Trevor Lawrence earlier in the season, he had 8 interceptions the first 7 games. But then over the last 7 games, 22 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. He'll be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. They may have my number 1 rated defensive line in the country this year. In fact, they do have my number 1 rated defensive line in the country this year. Xavier Thomas, Tyler Davis, Pinckney, Foster are all guys that were young last year. Remember, they lost all those guys in the NFL. They played well, and now they're all back this year. Plus, there's good depth there. They have a number 5 set of linebackers. But having Trevor Lawrence back, I think, was a key factor there. And with Ohio State, for sources I had heard from Georgia was, can Justin Fields read defenses? That was prior to last season. Well, 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Okay, the guy can read defenses. Other than that, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the arm strength, he's got everything you want in a quarterback. So I think Justin Fields is going to be a front runner for the Heisman along with Lawrence. And then Ohio State, much like Alabama, had 3 guys turn down the NFL and return on the offensive line. So a veteran offensive line and Justin Fields, their usual good defense. But I think the quarterback play was the key to me putting those 2 in the title game as opposed to putting Alabama in there.
So you have Alabama at number 3 preseason and the pick to win the SEC. A lot of conventional wisdom may say, okay, Georgia's right behind. Georgia, the easy pick to win the SEC East. But even before you get to Georgia in your top 25 rankings, you have 2 teams from the SEC West just in front of them. Number 5, Texas A&M. Number 6, LSU, the defending national champion. I think a lot of people expect LSU to be in the mix, but how about the Texas A&M Aggies coming in at number 5 in your rankings this year?
Yeah, and actually what you're probably looking at there is my power poll, which is my computer numbers on it. In my actual preseason top 40 this year, I've got Texas A&M number 5. I have Georgia number 6. I have LSU down at number 11. So just that. But here's what I like about Texas A&M, and it goes back to my phone call with Coach Fisher last year. And 2 things really jumped out to me about Texas A&M last year. The first thing was they were a young team. very few seniors. So in my head, I'm thinking, wow, this team's really going to be good next year. And then the schedule. The schedule was on my mind coming into the phone call. It looked hellacious. And as it turns out, they actually played 3 number 1 ranked teams last year. When they took on Clemson, Clemson was number 1 ranked. When they took on Alabama, Bama was number 1 ranked. When they took on LSU, LSU was number 1 ranked. They also took on the number 4 and the number 8 teams in the country. So that young team lost 5 games to top 10 teams last year. And I told Coach Fisher at the end of the call last year, I said, Coach, I'm going to put you on my national magazine next year. Well, here it is next year. Texas A&M's got a veteran team, 17 returning starters, including Kellen Mond. They got my number 12 D-line, number 9 set of linebackers, number 6 DBs, and the schedule is so much easier. I rated the number 66 schedule this year. They may play just one top 10 team all year in Alabama. Other than that, I've got A&M as my dark horse surprise team. And I had a pretty good record with the surprise teams. A couple years back, we had Washington making the playoffs. They weren't in the top 10. 2 years ago, I had Notre Dame as my number 1 surprise team, a non-top 10 team. They made the playoff. Last year, I had Utah. And if Utah won that doggone Pac-12 title game, they would have made the playoff last year. A&M's my number 1 surprise team in the country.
And then with LSU having to reload, losing a lot off last year's national championship team. But once again, Phil, they have the talent to reload and really challenge Alabama and Texas A&M.
Yeah, and how many times have we seen Alabama reload after losing so many people to the NFL? And you look at LSU's depth and talent that they have the depth and talent to get there. In fact, almost all the units rank in my top units in the front of the magazine. I think this year's LSU team is going to be a very good one, and they get Alabama at home, so their potential's there. They got the number 1 receiving core in the country. They got my number 2 defensive backs in the country, led by Derek Stingley, and they also are solid on special teams at number 5. But 14 players drafted, 20 players in the NFL overall. I don't think and they lose their co-offensive coordinator to the NFL. I think when you look at this year's team, they're a good team, but they probably drop a couple games. So I have them coming in 3rd in the West, a very good team, but just not quite up to Alabama and A&M this year.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, a very good Georgia team. You had them pick 6th this season. And how does it change things maybe for them that they have to come to Tuscaloosa, play the Crimson Tide in September? Does that really open the door for any other teams in what should be another talented year for the SEC East?
Yeah, and I think you're going to find that when the SEC media votes that they're probably going to vote Florida number 1 in the East this year because Florida's got the better schedule. Florida hosts LSU. Georgia has to travel to face Alabama. Georgia only has 3 SEC home games. Florida's only got 3 SEC true road games because of the neutral site one in Jacksonville. So Florida clearly has the better schedule. They've got Mullen's best team that he's put on the field so far. All 8 units rank in my top units. But I did go with Georgia winning the East this year because I'm a defensive guy, Roger. And I have Georgia having the top defense in the country. They got my number 5 rated D-line, number 1 set of linebackers, number 4 DBs. And while they don't have those marquee players, they do rotate a lot of players. They go about 3 deep in every game, rotate a lot of players, and the bulk of them are back from last year when you look at them defensively. And offensively, yeah, Jake Fromm's gone, but you know what? Replacing him with Jamie Newman and JT Daniels, look out. They are loaded at the quarterback spot. Zamir White is a guy who has a redshirt frosh last year, was coming off a knee injury and rushed for 408 yards. Well, now he's another year removed off that knee injury. I think he's one of the best running backs in the game, along with James Cook, Kenny McIntosh. Offensive line is probably my biggest question mark, but when you might have the number 1 defense in the country, they're going to have to be on my list somewhere, and I've got them coming out of the SEC East as the champs.
Speaking of the SEC East, of course, Alabama's permanent rival from the SEC East is the Tennessee Volunteers. The Crimson Tide will go to Knoxville this season. And last year, it was a tighter game in the second half than maybe some expected. What do you see out of Jeremy Pruitt's program in year 3 in Knoxville?
Yeah, how about that Garantano jump over the line and fumble, and Alabama returns it for a touchdown to put the game away. That was quite a big play in that one. And here's what I see with Tennessee. And, talking to Coach Pruitt each of the 3 years he's been there, that first year, he wasn't overly thrilled with the talent that he had on hand. Let's face it, he was coming from programs like Alabama and Georgia, and Tennessee didn't have that type of talent. And that first year he was there, they lost 6 games by 25 points or more. Then last year, they looked like they were going to miss out on a bowl again, but won their final 6 games. and won the bowl game to finish out the year 8-5. Now they've got a lot of momentum, a lot of enthusiasm, and Pruitt's had 3 recruiting classes to bring in his type of players. The first year I talked to Coach Pruitt, they had 8 scholarship offensive linemen. This year, 16, so much deeper. Same thing, defensive line. 5 scholarship defensive linemen when he took over. Now they go 10 deep on the D-line. So it's his deepest team he's had. It's his most talented team he's had. And I asked Coach Pruitt straight up, I said, you know what, you're playing Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, Alabama. How do you feel you compete with these guys? And he said he feels they can beat anybody on their schedule this year. So if you're a Tennessee fan, Coach Pruitt feels they're going to be a contender in the East, and I think they've got the talent and the experience level to get there. And this year, I think the most experienced teams will benefit the most, with everybody having a shortened spring.
Last team I wanted to touch on, another one of the Crimson Tide rivals, and a team that did beat Alabama last year down in the Plains, the Auburn Tigers. I believe you have them in the top 20 this year. What are you expecting to see from Auburn this year?
Auburn surprised me in 2 games last year. They beat A&M. I thought A&M would win that. And they beat Alabama. I thought Alabama would win that. So they're a team that can pull some surprises. Now, my biggest question marks for them are up front. Their offensive line is basically gone from last year. So that's a question mark, how quick the offensive line comes around. They've got the veteran quarterback now in Bo Nix. They've got talented receivers, Stove, Schwartz, Williams, a lot of speed at that receiver position. They've got some good running backs. How that offensive line comes around is going to be the key. And then defensively, they had arguably the best defensive line in college football last year. Well, they've lost some pieces. Derek Brown's gone, Marlon Davidson's gone, but they still return Big Cat Bryant. They still return Derek Hall, Truesdell, so they're good up front on the defensive line. I wouldn't call them the best defensive line in college football like they had last year. The linebacking core is solid, much more veteran unit there. The secondary, a little bit of a question mark. So when you look at Auburn, they're only number 100 on my experience chart. They play a tough schedule. I've got Auburn coming in 4th in the West behind LSU, A&M, and Alabama.
Well, Phil, it's been a blast to catch up with you over the last 15 minutes or so. And if you could just one more time, just tell our fans where they can pick up Phil Steele's 2020 college football preview.
Well, I appreciate that, Roger. Once again, limited distribution this year. We're only putting out 50,000 of them and not available everywhere. It will be available at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. It's hitting many Barnes & Nobles right now. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million available. Or you can go online to philsteele.com. That's STEELE, philsteele.com to pick up your magazine today. Order today and we'll ship it out, and you'll get it in 1 to 3 days, sent priority mail.
All right, well, we look forward to our fans doing that. I can't wait to dive into my copy coming up soon as we get ready for this upcoming college football season. Phil, thanks again.
Hey, great talking football with you, Roger. A lot of fun today.
All right, that's been Phil Steele, and thank you for watching this edition of Crimson Live.